Orchestra and Master Mularski for the performance, and it's truly been an honor for me to work with all of them. Also, I would like to thank the competition department for making this opportunity possible through the orchestra competition. You know, like words, yes, words can describe how grateful I am at this point to be a Juilliard student, like surrounded by these rich resources and wonderful opportunities. And this year is especially meaningful to me because it's actually my second time working with the Juilliard Orchestra for the Composer Concert at Alex Rico. So, because back in 2024, my first symphony Crossing was premiered by the Juilliard Orchestra. So I feel especially, great to be back again. Before I talk about music, can I just share a little bit about how I understand music, and I'll share about what was my inspiration of my compositions and how I approach them. So as a composer, my inspiration mostly comes from the large and serious themes such as life philosophy, human emotions, cultural memories, and social justice. And at the core of these themes are the universal values, such as compassion, belonging, love. So, because I strongly believe a good music has to balance two things: connecting the common audience spiritually and using the advanced compositional techniques in a meaningful way. So, in practice, I always focus on the listener's experience. I want the audience to reflect, to introspect, and to connect my music on a deeper and personal level. And on a more musical level, I often work with very limited ideas because I believe that art is not about adding more, but it's about reducing. And I think it's so easy to pile up materials, but much more harder to write something that is expressively rich and also technically rich from something really simple. And also for me, a structure of a piece is really important. So when I compose, I constantly ask myself, where is this section going? And what role does it play? Because I want to try to make every part clear in its function and purpose so that the audience can actually follow how the music grows. So with all of this in mind, I would like to introduce the piece that you're about to hear, Echoes of Impermanence. So this piece was written in 2025, and it reflects my thoughts on this world because I've been living in New York for a few years, and I think I've been deeply affected by the city's noise, its relentlessness, and its this kind of constant change. So on the surface, I feel the material world abundant, but at the same time, I also feel empty. I don't know if how many of you have the same feelings. So, and then I began to ask myself a question that if time will eventually dissolve everything we have, then what is actually, worth holding on to? So this symphony is basically an answer to that question. So, structurally, the whole piece begins like it grow away from a sustained tone, and then finally dissolve back into it. So I think this overarching structure reflects the impermanent nature of our life, where everything we gain will eventually pass away. And through this process, a cyclical process happened that the music, it develops from the hands of a tonal crowd, and then it stretches into something distant and chaotic as the tension accumulates, and then it just claps and vanishes into the air. So after each collapse, the musical momentum pushes forward the music to the next hill, which is always more intense and higher than the previous one. So until the largest and the most intense hill forms the overall climax of this piece. And among all this process of building up, there's some tonal chorale that emerges, and I think that for me represents the most fragile but essential part of our inner selves. That the memories and emotional connections that we spend with others that we cherish the most. And also in this piece, I hope to capture a sense of duality, which is the interplay between chaos and harmony and the relentless physical power that contained within moments of warmth. Personally, I think we are living in a really dazzling world that with so many things going on. So, essentially, I want this piece to serve as a reminder of us of the memories, the warmth, and the emotions that are truly matter and are worth cherishing to all of us.
It's really beautiful. You were talking about all these different inspirations, both your lived experience being in the city, and also different literary experiences or interests. And I'm curious how, from that standpoint, I know you were quoting Emily Dickinson, and I'm curious, some of those inspirations that feed into your thought process. Can you speak to some of those?
Oh yeah, sure. So I do quote a letter by Emily Dickinson, and she's one of my favorite poets. So in my composing, I always dig into the poetry and some of the literature works, as well as I think as a composer, we also shoulder a responsibility of sensing the what's happening around us. So I think I want to become a composer who can shoulder some of the social responsibilities.
That's perfect. And this being your second time in this process, I'm also curious what that experience is like from going from having done this a few years back to this time. How do you feel you've changed? What has that journey been like from young Jacky to today?
Well, it's an amazing experience, and I think it's hard for me to imagine that time just went so fast. And sitting there today reminds me of 2 years ago. I do think I grew a lot. Thankfully for I think being as a Juilliard student, I'm really grateful because I think most of my growth is kind of related to what school has offered to us. For example, during my first rehearsals, I learned a lot between the coordination between a composer and the conductor, and also the relationship about the conductor of different instrumentalists, how you connect with them, and also as a composer, I learned that the value of the music doesn't only exist on the score itself, but also lies on how practical, how playable and how practical the actual performance is. So I think that's something that I learned from the first working with the Juilliard Orchestra, and when I was working this time with the orchestra, I feel more confident, and I think more. I just know how to commute and how can this triangle, like conductor, the players, and the composer, how we can build like a mechanism to effectively communicate.
And one of the great things about the program here is that the composers, they all have an opportunity to have a reading with the orchestra. So So although these are the 4 featured for the concert, the others are also they get to work with the students along the way, because as you were saying, that instrumentalist feedback is so crucial to this process. And to your point, working with the conductor, and how does that trilogy work well?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jackie.
Thank you.